Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's an honor to receive all of you, our dear and honored guests, but we are even more honored, or specially honored, to receive our friends from Venezuela. They honor us with our presence tonight. These comrades who come from so far away have come not just to speak the truth at the United Nations, but to engage in what we like to call people's diplomacy. The engaging of dialogue with people's movements and organizations, journalists, cultural activists, leaders who want to share with you tonight a little bit about their experiences, their perspectives. But also we hope to learn from our Venezuelan friends tonight. We know that at this moment in history, there is immense pressure on the Venezuelan people to give up their project of sovereignty, their project towards a socialist society. And we stand here with you to say, we're not going to let that happen. Part of this gathering tonight that we are actually live streaming to friends across the planet. I wanted to share that many of the organizations that come into building this place, called the People's Forum, among them is this project called the International People's Assembly, which is a network of over 200 organizations, trade unions, people's movements across the world, who together have committed to reviving an international left project in the 21st century through media, culture, activism, research, political education. And what we have in this room, in a sense, is a small reflection of some of the organizations that participate in that process. Before we start and do the sort of the heart of this event tonight, I actually wanted to present to you Comrade Vijay Prashad. He is director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and has been a key, I would say, the intellectual author of our left crimes against the empire. And we have asked him to share a brief analysis from our perspective of how we see the current geopolitical situation around the world and how we are activated in this struggle against imperialism today.
It's great to be here with you. It's a real pleasure. Samuel, nice to see you again. This is a really interesting time that we're in, I think, because the United States, as you know, still has this immense capacity to destroy countries. Let's not underestimate the power of this great and awful military, and I mean awful in both senses of the term. It keeps us in awe of it because of its scale and its destructive capacity, and it's awful because it destroys the lives of people all over the world, by threat and by actual bombardment. It's at this point that we live where this amazing power exists, and this power exists principally for ill. It hasn't for a very long time done anything other than ill. But at the same time, because it's so immense, it miscalculates repeatedly, most urgently, by trying desperately to make a crass arms deal with Australia look like a military agreement. You know, they're trying to camouflage essentially commerce as security. That's a miscalculation because it disrupted the great Atlantic alliance, which Joe Biden said he was going to revive by doing what? By having a Secretary of State who speaks French. You see, that was supposed to build the bridges that Trump broke. Well, they really disrupted the bridges with this arms deal. But that's not the main miscalculation. Afghanistan was a miscalculation. Iraq was a miscalculation. Libya was a miscalculation. Venezuela has been a miscalculation. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't want to come too close. That's the thing. So there have been a series of miscalculations, and I think we should register those, but not exaggerate them. I think it's really important at this point to see that imperialism is frazzled, but has not been defeated. And multipolarity is appearing, but it has not appeared. I think we are in that point where it can go either way. And to strengthen multipolarity is the most important political objective of this conjuncture. That multipolarity has to be strengthened in the interstate system, what Venezuela led, which was the group of friends in defense of the UN Charter. 25% of the world's people belong to that platform. Register that, friends. 25% of the world's people belong to that group in defense of the UN Charter, and it gets virtually zero media attention. 40% of the world's people, 40% belong to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. 40% of the world's people. You see that covered nowhere. We still imagine the international community to be the G7. We still imagine that. That's the old colonial mentality. The international community says you're thinking the G7. You might think the Security Council permanent members. You might. But you really think the G7. Well, you actually think the United States government. When they say international community, they mean the US government. What they don't mean is 40% of the people of the world in a grouping, in a legitimate grouping, that meets to discuss a pressing problem in the world. And they started meeting in July of 2001, and that pressing problem in the world, my friends, was Afghanistan. They founded the SCO in July 2001 to deal with the question of the Taliban. At the time, the only credible group that would have been able to engage the Taliban, the United States set them aside and proceeded to bomb Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a test case, my friends. It's a test case for this interregnum in which we sit between the collapsed, constant miscalculations of imperialism and the emergence of multipolarity. We have to strengthen multipolarity at the interstate level. That's the group of friends. But we must strengthen multipolarity at the people-to-people level. It is very important to rebuild the fabric of popular internationalism. And the reason I'm so proud and happy to be part of the process known as the International People's Assembly is that we are working day and night to rebuild the fabric, the social fabric of internationalism, and to build that social fabric around the political context, the political concept of multipolarity. Because we believe that having one country masquerade as the international community, particularly when that one country is a dangerous country, particularly when that one country doesn't see humanity as a unified set of all the 7.9 billion people. If that country sees humanity as its people first, everybody else second, case in point, footnote number 1, the vaccines. Footnote number 1, and look, that too, the American population refuses to get vaccinated. There are people in India who are dying to be vaccinated. United States people don't get vaccinated and they refuse to release the patent on the vaccine to allow people in India. People in Rwanda, which is just in the middle of a ridiculous intervention in Mozambique, the vaccination rate in Rwanda, 5%. Dying to get vaccinated, but this country will not allow the patent to be lifted. That's a good illustration of the level of humanity. You cannot allow one country to dominate the politics of the world, least if that one country has an understanding of humanity that corrals its own people first and everybody else second. The reason we have to build multipolarity is we need a different path. We can't afford this. The planet can't afford this. The planet can't afford this. Socialism cannot afford this. And one of the leading vectors of socialism in our time is the project that you are all doing in Venezuela. And therefore, I am proud to stand here with you, standing with the Venezuelan revolution, one front in the global fight for socialism. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vijay. We now want to pass the mic to Claudia La Cruz. She is executive co-director of the People's Forum and a longtime activist and popular educator here in the US.
Oh, I'm holding it up, it was just not on. But thank you. Welcome, welcome. It is our pleasure to welcome you into the space. We are honored because for us, Venezuela is a shining light, as is Cuba, as is China, models that we should aim to create internally in the United States of America. So thank you so much for being with us. I was tasked with sharing some reflections in regards to our domestic situation in the United States. And it's hard to follow, Vijay, always. So I'll try to do this as best as I can. I think it's important to understand that in the crisis in which we are today in the world, because of the health crisis, because of the economic crisis, which is a capitalist crisis, those who are carrying the burden of these crises are the poor and working class people. And the United States is not the exception. We know that the elite have increased their wealth by 30% in this moment of economic and global health crisis, which means that they're doing well. And they will continue to do well for as long as a crisis is there, because that's what capitalism thrives on. Now, when we're talking about this multi-layered crisis, it's important to highlight just several things or aspects that are happening within the United States that have the potentiality of creating a strong movement and that we should be looking into, and have the potentiality as well for us to make connections with what's happening across the globe, an internationalist popular front, and the unity of the working class in the United States. And those four aspects that I want to highlight, first is the aspect of unemployment in the United States. And I brought my little paper just to share some statistics, you know, because people thrive on that. So the first issue being unemployment. As we all know, it reached record levels during the pandemic, and it is reported that more than 26.8 million workers became jobless or have dropped in hours or pay because of the health crisis. This past July, there was an increase of 5.3% in unemployment claims, right? And what happened this month? This month, there was an expiration of the unemployment benefits for folks that were surviving off these benefits, right? And so we need to consider also that a lot of the working class health benefits are connected to employment. And what does that mean to our communities when they are not receiving any type of workers' benefits in an increasing number of COVID cases and hospitalizations? People are unable to access healthcare and are losing jobs and are unable to be able to apply again for unemployment benefits, right? The second issue is that the Supreme Court decided to end the eviction moratorium. That's a struggle that a lot of our folks that are in this space right now are involved in. And as a consequence of this ruling, approximately 11 million families will now face eviction. 2 million families will be foreclosed. They will be losing their homes. We can estimate that 25 million people will be pushed into homelessness. And this is not taking into consideration that there were 500,000 people who were homeless prior to the pandemic. Okay? So we're talking about millions and millions of people that are going to go into homelessness. The third issue is hunger. You know, the wealthiest country in the world, who has extracted so many resources, has 42 million people facing hunger and food insecurity every day. Out of those 42 million people, 13 million are children. The health crisis has intensified conditions of hunger for working class families, communities who have been historically marginalized and who live paycheck to paycheck. So during the pandemic, there were a lot of mutual aid projects, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of food banks that came into the rescue because of the vacuum that exists, a vacuum that has existed for decades. Food is running dry for these programs. What's gonna happen to the people that are facing food insecurity in this moment? So that's a huge struggle that we need to figure out how to strengthen. The fourth issue is the attack on women's reproductive right. We have digressed immensely with this abortion ban in Texas. And it's a model that many other states will continue to implement if we don't fight back and engage in the process of defending our right to abortion. The majority of the folks that will be facing this are the working class women, mostly Black, Latina, indigenous women who already are disproportionately discriminated against and have lack of access to healthcare. So these are just a few examples of the many issues that the working class faces. Obviously, there are struggles around police brutality. There are struggles for the abolishment of prisons. There are struggles for access to healthcare. We could continue to name them. And the Democratic Party does not have a solution to them. It's not beneficial to them as part of the ruling class tool, right? And so we need to be able to figure out how to create a unified movement that is politically independent of the bourgeois ruling party. A lot of us are engaged in the process of attempting to build that. Internationally, the International People's Assembly is a platform, but I think in many ways, it's important to understand that this attack in the working class of the United States is very much connected to the foreign policies that we see as well. There is obviously the need. What's happening in the border right now, a lot of people are like, oh my God, Haitian people, we've seen this before. White men and horses whipping Black bodies. And imperialism is the expression of white supremacy internationally. That's what it is. And so when we see children at the border that are being separated from their parents and that are being encaged, this is also a result of imperialism. And in the process of being able to build this independent mass movement of the working class, it is important to make the connections between imperialism and the attacks in the working class in the United States. For us, it's important, and again, when I say us, I mean the different spaces that we are a part of, to be able to identify the need for war of the ruling class. They need war. Every time there is a crisis, historically, there is a need for war. And they're pivoting now to China, and they're continuing their attack on Venezuela. They're continuing their attack on Cuba, and they're waging an attack also on Peru. And any project that divorces itself from the capitalist and imperialist logic. What does that mean for us? Again, as movements that are seeking to build a different United States, that are aiming to build socialism in this country, we need to be able to continue to engage in these type of exchanges, strengthen our relationships, learn with and from our comrades that are actually building a revolution, because it's very easy to sit in the United States and criticize revolutionary processes without having made one here. So we need to learn from those processes and be able to build people-to-people solidarity, be able to connect sectors of the working class doing the work in those socialist projects and doing the work here. Again, we are so thankful for having you all here, for welcoming our comrades who have been here before, and we look forward to the exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And now we want to give the mic to our dear friend Felix, who tonight is not just the foreign minister of Venezuela, but who is a fellow comrade in the global struggle for peace and justice, all the just causes of the planet. So, my brother, welcome to the People's Forum.
Ooh. First of all, I want to say I'm very sorry about being late. We're late because we had a very intense agenda within the framework of the General Assembly, which means that we tried to meet as many foreign ministers from different foreign countries to pass the word about the reality of what's going on in Venezuela. It was a great opportunity to tell them how much we're affected by the unilateral coercive measures being taken by some institutions in the US government to affect the interests of the people in Venezuela, because by no ways they're being capable to topple down the government, but the harm is been affecting the people, the common people on the street, the population of Venezuela. So that's why we're late, because today we met so many foreign ministers, but we also have an important meeting. You referred to that. Vijay, how do I pronounce your name? Vijay. You mentioned this event that we have early in the morning today at the embassy, which is an idea that's been working on for a long while by Samuel and our colleagues from our brothers, our comrades from other countries like Cuba, Iran, but even today, China, Russia, and Laos, and Cambodia, and 18 countries, 18 foreign ministers today signed with us or agree on releasing today that declaration that only wants to defend the Charter of the United Nations, which means working for the right of the people, for human rights, for sustainable development, and not to affect anybody or trying to impose any sanctions or coercive measures or invading or attacking or launching Tomahawks missiles in schools or hospitals. We don't do that. We don't want to do that. We all want to go back to a document that is the document with the most of consensus in humankind time. I mean, it's there for 70 years. It's so very important, so very large, so very complete. And is still neglected and abused by some countries. I'm not here, I have to say that. You have to forgive me for that, because though I'm a comrade here, I'm the foreign minister of Venezuela, visiting a foreign country, though in my character of representing my government through the United Nations. And I've been given a visa for with 25 miles? 25 miles. It's all right. We have to give an example. We don't want to intervene in the decisions of foreign countries. We don't want to even criticize whenever they're not affecting our people and whenever they're not going around and trying to impose their ways to different societies in different countries. Whatever they do in their country is their right, and is for you. It's the Mecca prayings, right? What time is it? It's the time. Beautiful. Do you have a mosque close by? Oh, somebody's mobile. Yeah, because my Muslim friends, they have that in the mobile, so they know they have to do it. So that's beautiful. Very beautiful. My Muslim friends, they have that app at their mobile, so they can remember they have to pray to Mecca. It is for you guys, you Americans or people that live here, a resident to this country, to complain. I'm amazed and surprised by all the figures you've been given. The situation here with the numbers is very sad. I came before becoming Minister for Foreign Affairs. I was ambassador of Venezuela to China, to the People's Republic of China. And I admire that country, and I get to understand how much good they're doing to their people. And it's 1.4 billion people. That's not a little number. And they're doing very good. It's an amazing country with a committed government that is taking care of the people. They invited me to a region neighbor to Myanmar, in which they say they completed the, there's no more poor people in China as they confirm. And that was the region in which they took us to let us understand and see what they've done. And it's amazing going to that part of the country and see the people working hard, the land, and looking very happy, and and taking care of the different ethnic groups that live there. They live there. You know, China is being accused because of many things, and some of the things that they're not protecting the rights of the different ethnic groups. It's not true. I've seen that. I've been there. And it's amazing how much they're promoting their rights and promoting their religion. Even the Muslim population in China, they're helping them to be capable to express their religious beliefs. I've been to many mosques in China, in Xinjiang, and spoken with the imams. And so I'm amazed by China, and I am very, very surprised and saddened by the numbers, the figures you just gave us. But I'm not here to talk about what you tell me about this country, because I want to stress that we have no problem with this country. And we are not trying to impose anything on this country. We're not trying to tell them what to do, how to do it. We are asking them to stop trying to impose illegal actions towards my people and our government, our legitimate government. That's all what we're doing. And we, thank you. We do it bilaterally. We're friends. And even countries are not that close friends. I mean, governments, not countries, not people. People to people, we're working very good with everybody. And it's part of our history. It's part of what we are. Venezuela, I'm diverting myself from what I was saying before, but Venezuela is a very inclusive, open society. In Venezuela, you'll see people of different religious confessions, and they live freely there. We have one of the largest Jewish communities in Latin America. They've been there for hundreds of, yes, actually I have to say hundreds, because I believe that we have the oldest cemetery in mainland America in Venezuela, in Coro, which was oldest capital city. Sepharad Jewish moving from Curacao, those Dutch islands off the coast of Venezuela, to our west coast, city of Coro, which is UNESCO's heritage, and it's protected. Part of the heritage is also the Jewish area of the city. The Jewish community was very large there. But we don't know how many Venezuelans of Muslim confession living with us. We can tell there's something from 100 to 500. And that's a large 100,000 to 500,000, sorry for that. And that's a large number for any Latin American country, which were mainly Catholics, because it's the religion the conquerors, the invaders imposed to the original people. So we're Catholic because it was imposed. The cross was, imposed. So, but we don't know. We can't tell you if it's 100,000 or 500,000, because we're not allowed to ask anybody what's your religious belief by law. We can't. It's not legal to ask anybody. It's not on the interest of the government to find out what is your religion. That's a private, personal matter. So, and we have millions of Venezuelans of foreign origin that came from Europe because of the civil war in Spain before, like my grandfather, who had to move from Spain in 1938 because of a civil war in Spain, and many others that came because of the Second World War and whatever was left there after the war, the economical difficult situation there. So we have millions of Venezuelans of Italian, Portuguese, French origin, and we have also millions of Venezuela that came from the Middle East, mainly from Syria, from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Jordan. Today we're still receiving brothers from Syria coming to Venezuela because they're being on the attack. I met the foreign minister of Syria today, and we're talking about how much well they're doing. They're overcoming the situation. And again, it looks very much alike. They tried the worst towards Syria, but President Assad is still president of Syria, but they really inflict pain on their people. I've been to Syria, and I had to go from Lebanon to Syria, and I know what happened there. I've seen it with my eyes, as well as I've seen it what happened in Baghdad, because I've been in Iraq and Baghdad, and I've seen it as well. So it's a very inclusive, open society, and from Latin America. There's millions of Venezuelans. Listen, the way we call them Venezuelans of Colombian origin. We don't call them Colombians, because they're living with us for many years, 70 years civil war, almost civil war, humanitarian crisis in Colombia. And I can tell myself, some of them, more than 1 million, are refugees. But we don't classify them as refugees, because when they needed to come to us 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, to protect them, we didn't classify them as refugees, because otherwise the paramilitaries would cross the borders, come to us, and kill them in Venezuela. And I can tell that myself, when I was young, I welcomed some refugees from Colombia in my house, and we didn't tell anybody they were refugees. They were migrants, economical migrants from Colombia, which is the larger number of Colombians living with us came because there is also the impossibility by that kind of government to provide dignified life to the majority of their population. So they have to go all around, sadly, and mainly to Venezuela, because we're so much alike. If there's two countries that look so much alike or are very close and very similar in Latin America, are Colombia and Venezuela. We share the Guajira and the original population that are still there and have the right to move from one side to the other side. There's no limits. They have the right to do it. The Guajiros, the Guayú community. But we share the Andean mountains, we share the llanos, the savannas, and we share the rivers and the Amazon rainforest. Is the same people. We share the same history. It was Simón Bolívar from Caracas that came and gave them freedom. It was Simón Bolívar who brought the name Colombia, because he wanted to have a country from up north, the real up north, to the south. One only country altogether. And he wanted to call it Colombia. He managed to organize the Great Colombia, or Gran Colombia, which is, I'm sure you all know very well about that. Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Quito, Guayaquil, whatever was the Nueva Granada, Viceroy, and Panama, because Panama was part of Nueva Granada. The name Colombia existed after that. It was created by Bolívar. It was brought by Bolívar, as much as the flag. That flag that you have there, the tricolor, the bandera bolivariana, is brought by a Caraqueño again, Miranda, and is the flag that we have in Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. There's difference on the size of the color thing, but it's the same 3 colors and the same flag that was brought by us when we came to liberate Nueva Granada and Quito, Guayaquil, and then we came up far south to Lima and Bolivia to give freedom to the Viceroy of Peru, which was the strongest and the main position of the Spanish Empire in the south, just compared to the one in the up north in Mexico. So the whole thing that I'm trying to refer here is that my country is very open, is very tolerant. We are always been that way since Bolívar taught us to be that way. We got it ever since that. That's more than 200 years ago. We started to be, or the beginning of our foundation is to give freedom to our neighbors and not to add land and to expand our territory. The territory of the Capitania of Venezuela, as it was called during the colonial time, is not bigger today. So we didn't come from the Caribbean or the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We've never done things like that. We integrated with different areas, and we created one new country called the Gran Colombia. But sadly, the elites of the 3 main capitals, Quito, Caracas, and Bogota, destroy that great opportunity of a beautiful project that was launched by Simón, dream of Simón Bolívar. And then on top of that, he called a long gathering in Panama. And on that gathering, he proposed to all the different areas of the former Spanish Empire to unify in one large country. But sadly, Bolívar invited representatives of different parts of the world, included England and the US, or the United, in that time, Union of that time, and they plotted there against the union and the creation of this beautiful dream. Then I have to, I agree, I have to refer to you what's going on nowadays in Venezuela. Well, we're still affected by the coercive unilateral measures, illegal being imposed by some institutions in the US government towards us. We are, as you know, an oil-producing country. It's our main business for the last 100 years. But everything was designed to produce petrol to send to this very large market, because we're very close, so it was very easy. So our refineries, because we own refineries in this country through this company called Citgo that has been taken illegally from us, from my government, from the Venezuelans. And the petrol came here, heavy petrol, which is the majority of the petrol we produce, or we have also light petrol. But today it is impossible for us to export the production, smaller production of petrol that we produce today, because it is difficult for us to buy spare parts for the industry, because the whole design was made by American technology. So there's no way we can access that, and there's no way we can upgrade the industry, and it's difficult to keep on producing more. Though we are trying to do it, we're fighting back, and we're doing it with the assistance of some important international friends like China, again, Russia, Iran, and all the countries around the world are working with us and trying to help us get good technology, alternative technology, change our technology, and even helping us trade our resources. And it doesn't stop there. We have many assets, financial assets being frozen around the world in many banks, but also our gold, some of our important resources like our gold has been frozen by the Bank of England. And I'm sure you all know about that, but I wanted to let you know, even though that is happening, we're fighting back, and the situation today is better. Why is it better? Because we're intensively committed to make it better. We're working very hard. We have good friends around the world, not just governments, but people that realizes this is not fair, this is not good, especially those that have the chance to come and visit us, and then when they go there, they realize the whole media war is a picture of something that is not really happening, that does not exist. Venezuela is not exporting anything wrong that they're trying to blame us for. But what we're trying to do is, and it is our commitment, and it is the best that the Bolivarian revolution has given to the world, is solidarity, cooperation, and support. And that's what we've been doing with Central America, with the Caribbean, with South America, and it is in our interest to do it south with Africa and Asian countries. So the government is passing some new legal text. You know, the former parliament was illegal. How do you say the? ¿Cómo que se dice que el parlamento era? ¿Cómo es la palabra que se usa para el parlamento? En desacato. How do you say? En desacato.
In contempt.
Huh?
In contempt.
In contempt. The former assembly. And we happen to have good new elections because the Constitution of Venezuela allowed us to do that. So the government of President Maduro called for a, ¿cómo se llama la asamblea constituyente? Constitutional Assembly. You know, when the words are coming from Latin root, it's very difficult to imagine they're so close. And then you think, no, it can't be, but sorry for that, they are. So, you know, they try everything. You know, those riots in which every day there was somebody being killed, mainly young students, because they used them. The president called for this assembly by the rights of the Constitution, and the very first day the election happened, the whole rioting was over. And just because of that, you should thank President Nicolas Maduro and congratulate him for doing that, not going on the other way. To blame him for what? For stopping the killing, for bringing peace to the country, using our Constitution that was approved by the majority of the population on a referendum. The 2000 Constitution, Bolivarian Constitution. So then from then on, applying always the Constitution, we have elections, and last year we have elections for the Assembly. Gladly, this Assembly in Desacato is gone, and now we have a proper General Assembly that's revising, studying, and passing legal text. In Venezuelan political constitutional tradition, the parliament or the assembly, National Assembly, is to revise draft of legal texts, approve them, and publish them. Not to have an MP, as they call it in UK, or diputado, pretending to become president of nothing. We have separate general elections to elect the head of state and head of government. And it is not as it is in some European countries, the parliamentarian system, or maybe because of the British tradition in some countries in Asia and Africa. Our system is much more based in that of France and the US. So our president is elected separately and is head of state and head of government. So this whole story of accusing the government to illegally abusing the rights of the parliament to form government is just to try to deceive the audience, but trying to get you understand that, oh, okay, of course, the guy is an MP, the guy is a deputy, he's got the right because he is the leader of the opposition group, and because they had majority, they have the right to be head of government state. No, it doesn't work like that in Venezuela. Not today, after the 2000 constitution. Before that, long before that, it's in a history, they wanted to confuse everybody. So that happened, and then again, today we're passing important legal texts being approved, discussed and approved in this National Assembly today with the opposition, because the opposition is present. The legal opposition, the opposition that didn't abandon the country and came to live in the US and invaded our offices, our embassy in Washington, our residence in Washington, our consulate in New York. They're all being invaded by those opposition supposed to be leaders with the help and the aid of the former government of the US, of some authorities of the former government of the US. Today we have a legal responsible assembly that's passing legal text to help and assist our people. So now we're in a better situation because of many things. And one of those things is because we have an assembly that's working for the people, and not that one that was just inviting foreign powers to attack Venezuela. MPs or deputies that were going to the borderlines with Colombia and passed to the border, illegally crossing the borders to Colombia, and from them on trying to invade Venezuela in a supposed to be humanitarian assistance aid. That happened. You all know very well about that. And not stopping there, coming to Washington to ask for some assistance to whatever terrible plan that will just imply pain and death and blood to our people, as much as I did it to in Europe, coming to different capitals in Europe. So that all happened, but today that's stopped. Today we have the more radical opposition, and I refer to more radical opposition that live in the US because they invaded our offices, our premises, and they didn't want to work and live a political life in the country and ask for the support of the people through the vote. I came to different countries to ask for something different. They now sitting down with the government and they sign a memorandum of understanding, so they're working on a dialogue that's been working well in Mexico City, thanks to President López Obrador, has allowed us to meet there together with this opposition in Mexico City. And the third meeting is going to be happening in the coming days. 2 meetings already happened. In those 2 meetings, we signed 2 important documents. One document is to defend the rights of the Essequibo region, which is a land that we are claiming as a right that we have. It was a land invaded by the English Empire, and sadly, Guyana inherited that situation. And we had an important agreement signed with the then government of Guyana in the 60s as they got independent from England or the British. And we have a framework to discuss together the way forward to solve that situation. There's no Venezuelan government trying to attack Guyana or invade Guyana or go against Guyana. Actually, all the country, we've always been assisting Guyana with every means we had, always. Either subsidized petrol prices or agricultural products or buying from them for our people. So that document and another document was signed in the second gathering of the dialogue groups. A second document that takes care of the people, social document, to give the best to the people that are suffering mainly because of the sanctions being imposed, stop us from importing, exporting, buying, and that is scaring everybody to have business relationship with Venezuelan government or any company in Venezuela because they're concerned about the implication that could mean coercive measure will be applied on them as well. So again, I'm saying the situation is much better. We're having this dialogue. The opposition is sitting down with the only legal, real government of Venezuela, which is the one that's presided by President Nicolás Maduro. So that's, again, a good thing that's going on and happening today. And as I said before, we have good friends around the world. Actually, we're friends with everybody around the world. We don't go and try to attack anybody or impose sanctions or intervene in the internal affairs. We're friends with countries, with governments on the right, governments on the... Of course, our closest friend are governments, are countries with governments that proclaim that socialism is the best way forward, is the only way to protect and save the people. That is a reality. That is the truth. That's why we have strategic alliances with Cuba, with Nicaragua. That's why we have a strategic, fundamental, important alliance with the People's Republic of China. That is working very good. That is helping from the very beginning. Talking about the pandemic of COVID, from the very beginning, the Chinese government has been very responsible and assist Venezuela, sending medical experts, doctors, and equipment. And today, even though the difficulties and the sanctions around, because even China is being sanctioned by some authorities and the government of the US, they're providing us with medical equipment and medicines, important to help the Venezuelans during this pandemic. And we can't tell today that Venezuela is a better case towards whatever is happening around in this continent regarding the pandemic. The two worst cases are our neighbors, sadly, Colombia and Brazil. And not to mention whatever I think the pandemic has affected very hard this country. I hope your government is doing better and is taking care of your people, and I believe they should be doing that, and I wish for the best. That's all I have to say about that. But Venezuela is a good example, and the other good example is Cuba as well, and there's two socialist governments. And I have to say the other good example is Nicaragua. And what is it that we have together, the three of us, is that we're socialist governments. And it's working good. Why? Because we care about the people. The main thing is the people and not the business. So we're taking care. When we needed to shut down the borders, we did. When we needed to stop the foreign, if the airlines flying with the tourists or whatever to Venezuela, we stopped that from happening, and it proved successful. So our numbers today are less of a drama as some bordering countries. So I wanted to let you know that the pandemic, the assistance of China was paramount, but also the system of Russia. And on that regard, I have to let you know that there's no access for us to different vaccines, but those produced in China, in Cuba, and in Russia. So we are being vaccinated with the best vaccines, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Cubans. I have nothing against the rest if they work and are properly good. Sorry for that. But we're receiving those because it's the only ones we have access to. Even COVAX system is not working for us. We transfer some money, 120 million. 120 million for a country is under boycott and unilateral coercive measures is a lot of money. And that resources were frozen on the way to being received by COVAX. So we're still waiting for the large number of vaccines that we need to receive after paying these $120 million. And with that, we'll have 100% of total population of Venezuela being vaccinated, which is what we like to get. We have the right to do that. So the right to the vaccines, the right to the formulas, we agree on that and we work on that. We're coming from Mexico, and during the CELAC meeting in Mexico, between Latin America and the Caribbean countries, we signed an important document in which we ask for the right to have open, free access to the formulas for everybody, for the vaccines against COVID. And it is a commitment of the whole region, Latin America and the Caribbean. 34 countries were present there. Nicolas Maduro, our president, delivered a fantastic, beautiful speech, again stressing what is Venezuela doing as a member of the international community. Cooperation, solidarity, and support. Always committed to that. And it is because of that that we created Petrocaribe. You know, I'm sure you very well know about what is Petrocaribe. It is impossible for us today to keep on helping 18 countries in the Caribbean region and providing with them some special oil agreement. Why? Because we cannot, I mean, any vessel that will leave our shores or our territorial waters will be chased to be stopped and impose on that vessel unilateral coercive measures. So we cannot help 18 countries in the Caribbean that will need our assistance because we have so much oil. And we're ready to give a support, not just to this country, the assistance of petrol prices in better conditions, but as you very well know, to even cities and areas in this country. We provide some special prices for heating oil. Heating, does it call heating oil?
Yeah,
heating oil. And we signed in those time an agreement with the GLA, General London Authority, when Ken Livingstone, my friend, our comrade Ken Livingstone, was the mayor, an agreement to help those in London that has no access to any privilege, any assistance, because we have to go to all the legal limits imposed by the European Union. In those time, the United Kingdom was part of the EU. So we had to go to all the legal difficulties to to find out what is the way to legally sign between GLA and the oil company of Venezuela, PDVSA, an agreement to access and help those living in London that did not receive any benefit. And we did it. And it worked. But then it was stopped when Boris Johnson arrived as mayor of London. Again, those leaders of the right going against the people. Because what was the damage, or what was the abuse, or the awful how do you say that, imposition or presence of a foreign government as Venezuela by providing assistance to those that received nothing by the very institution or alternative they have within the framework of the EU in the UK to receive assistance. You know, those are underemployed, no employed, whatever. We had to go through all that and find out, and he had to go to foreigners living in London that were in a legal situation and received no benefits. And for them, we find a way to help them. But Boris Johnson arrived to the government of the city and then stopped the agreement. And today we cannot help our brothers in Petrocaribe. And they stop every little initiative that we created, like UNASUR, and they're making it very difficult for ALBA TCP, our relationship with Cuba, with Central America, with the Caribbean, with South America, and our commitment towards Africa and Asia through different forums and platforms that we created, like ASA, América del Sur and Africa, or ASPA, América del Sur y Países Árabes. Very important. They're stopped, they're frozen. It's difficult. But we're working on that. During this gatherings or meetings with different foreign ministers from Africa and Asia, I told them about the need to take it over, to work again with an ASPA and us. It's very important. And we invite them to join us in ALBA TCP, which is an important platform in which Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, some island states in the Caribbean are part. Bolivia is part of that as well. And this is a good platform for the future, and it's important. So by that, I wanted to give you a wider perspective, a scope of a positive situation, even though the worst of the scenarios. Because the unilateral coercive measures not being stopped. They're there. And every day is a new little aspect and every day somebody else is being affected or impose sanctions. It can happen to me when I leave the door. But I'm ready for that. We don't care. We don't care. It's sad because it's abusive of the international law. And it is sad, but we're going to fight back. And for that, today we signed this important document. And we're inviting more countries. And more countries will be added to that. We're sure, as you say, the figures. China is within it. And that means 1.4 million people in the group. Billion, 1.4 billion people. Yeah, the numbers in English are difficult. The way you, I'm not a mathematician. Sorry for that. My English is leaving me.
Your English is
No. So 1.4, just China. Russia was there, 140, 150. But many other countries, the Laos, Cambodia, African countries like Angola, and many Latin American, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia. So the numbers are large, you're very right. But that will increase. In our meetings, foreign ministers were listening to us, mainly to Samuel, who's the one who created the whole thing. That's his baby. And also former Minister Jorge Arriaza worked very hard for that. We have to thank him for all his deed. I remember coming with him to New York, and he was so insisted on that with Samuel and him working hard with the head of the mission of Russia, always present, and Syria and Iran. Iran is another member country, and there are 80 million people, 35. It's a large number. You're very right about the number. You know, this morning I didn't realize about the figures. because it's very large. Always use, and I like to use, because Venezuela is so very keen in having best relationship with everybody. And I always use the figures between the population in China and in India. And that's about 3 billion people. That's a lot. So, and we have good relationship with India, traditionally, independently of the government in India. Our relationship with them is very important because we work in the multilateral and international gatherings, and their position is always to defend the principles in which we should be working and not the abuse of the law, international law. 3 billion, that's a lot, very important. Hopefully, in the future, we have even India with us, because they do defend the, in India, they do defend the Charter and the principles of the system of the United Nations and the international law. We know that. We very much, we're members of NAM with India. We're part of that. Non-aligned movement, sorry. NAM is the bread? Sorry. NAM, as they call it in non-aligned movement. In Spanish es NOAL. NOAL, or M-NOAL. And we're there with India, and we're working very good with India. Fantastic. So maybe they'll join us. I'm meeting the Indian foreign minister in the coming days. So we'll invite him to consider joining us on this group, because this group is not hidden agenda. This group is not abusing of the law. This group is just using the charter. We don't have it here, but you all have seen it, which is very complete, comprehensive. And if the minister of Russia this morning, he said, if you don't like this document, you don't like international law. If you don't side with this document today, the one we launched today, you don't care about the system of the United Nations, it's stupid. Every country should align with this. Because it's, as it is, it's the most consensus document in history. And it's been there valid for 70 years, though it's put under the table and forgotten and put it to the side and impose unilateral sanctions. We don't care about the charter, put it down there, we're so powerful. I'm not referring to any country. I can't. I'm a foreign minister from Venezuela, and I receive a visa to come to this country to go to the United Nations, though just 25 miles. And on that I have to complain, because it's not correct.
No hospitality here.
When you coming not to do anything but participate at the United Nations to have those limits. I'm sure there's a legal text that allows them to do that, but it's sad, it's bad, it's not good, doesn't feel good. And we want to have good relationship with the US, always. My president, it's not me talking, he said our hands are open for an open discussion with the government of the US. He even said that before when Mr. Trump was around. But he said it again to President Biden. And when President Biden was elected by the majority of the Americans, we congratulated him officially. It was a decision of the Americans. We have nothing to say about that. This is the same thing we ask for the rest on us. They have no right to tell us who should be the president. It is just for the Venezuelans to decide on that. And we have our own electoral system that works very good for us, and it's direct system of voting. And it works very good for us. And it's been there for a long while. We're very happy. And we have nothing to say about the system they apply in any other country. So I think I've talked enough. And I think it's good to have... question. But I think it's good that we have Samuel talking. Maybe wrong here. You've heard him many times, I'm sure. So we can escape him. And I'm sure you've heard him many times, but we should give the floor to Samuel, because today is a big day for us because of what we did early in the morning. So we have to wake up very early. It was very early for our agenda every day. But what we did this morning at the mission, gathering all these 18 head ministers, and at that level, approving that document and committing to gather in every international organization. Human Rights Geneva, Food Organization in Rome, UNESCO's in Paris. It's not just United Nations New York. It's going to be everywhere. Then the Hague, the Hague, in Holland. Everywhere there is an international organization, Nairobi, ONU, United Nations Habitat. We're going to be meeting as a group with the NAM. We're proposing this to the non-aligned movement group, to gather there and talk about the Charter of the United Nations in this 18 group of countries that are just defending the Charter. So Samuel, maybe you can speak a bit more on this.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Felix. Felix is my brother. We have been friends for years and years, and now we are together again in this battle. Thank you very much to you all for coming this evening to listen to us and share and discuss, and I am very much looking forward to your questions, which I think are guiding our thoughts and answers better than we imagining what you would like to know. But just to say a few words, I'm sorry to say that, but we're extremely tired. I mean, we have been 3 days non-stop talking and talking, and listening to Felix saying the same thing. I mean, there is a number of times that exactly. There is a number of times that you can't really. But okay, let's do it with you now. And there are so many ideas that I want to discuss with you, but one thing that I'm really missing over the last week that nobody's talking about, and really would like at least to say it, mention it, is that the president of Haiti 2 months ago was killed by 26 Colombian mercenaries paid by some American companies down in Florida, supported by the American government and the Colombian government, and nobody's speaking about that anymore. What's going on? I mean, they tried to do the same to our president last year, and nobody believed it. Say, no, Maduro is, making things up, he's making stuff up. No, Venezuelans always talking crazy stuff. But what do you want us to prove? To be killed is the actual proof of the conspiracy? I mean, there was a conspiracy last year. There is a conspiracy. There was a conspiracy last July, and they actually killed the president of Haiti. Never in the history of our continent, never. I checked it. One president of one country was killed by mercenaries from another country. Never. There have been many killings of presidents, even here, but not, by the way, but not that many, not by mercenaries from another country. And just that didn't happen 200 years ago, 50 years ago, it happened 2 months ago. And the mercenary industry, the industry of death, the industry of, the war, which is actually in full growth right now, in full speed ahead. Mercenaries from Colombia, mercenaries from America, from the United States, mercenaries from, I didn't know, for example, by researching this stuff, because we wrote a letter to the Security Council denouncing this, that there were Colombian mercenaries training Mexican narco-traffickers in Sinaloa. I didn't know that. There were Colombian mercenaries in Yemen, Colombian mercenaries in Syria, Colombian mercenaries in Libya, Colombian mercenaries, in so many places, Honduras as well, by the way. But the idea is there is an industry of mercenaries paid by American money, the US money, US companies, and they openly planned and killed presidents, and apparently it's normal. Nobody's speaking about that anymore. That's one of the flagrant violations of international law, and it's incredible that it's always already old news. The second thing is that we were talking to some friends this morning from, I think some of them are here tonight, about sanctions. Sanctions Killed is the group, I think. I think you are connected to them somehow. Okay, this is one of our friends this morning talking to us. Sanctions Killed. And these are simple truths. 1/3 of humanity is 39 countries, by the way, are under sanctions right now. We don't call them sanctions. We call them, in the technical slang from the United Nations, unilateral coercive measures, because they are illegal. The only sanctions legal are, the only legal sanctions are the ones ordered by the Security Council, the UN Security Council, but any other kind of imposition from one country to another is illegal. It violates the charter, precisely. Exactly. It's coercive. It's unilateral, it's coercive, but it's a massive violations of human rights. 1/3 of humanity is suffering a massive human rights violation, and nobody's speaking about that. Even some of the friends, when they actually confessed that 2 years ago when we spoke about that first time to them, they had to check it, and they did. And they realized it was an actual truth, but nobody speaks about that. And this is an interesting fact. Every single day, millions of people in Venezuela, for example, we don't have access to essential elements for life, like vaccines, because the United States government is blocking our funds and stopping companies. It's not sanctions or coercive measures only to Venezuela, but also to other countries, that they are so afraid to sell us health equipment, for example, that they say, well, sorry, we can't do that. Even, I have to say, even China. There are companies that we talk to them, say, well, look, sorry, I don't want to touch that. It was so difficult to convince them, and now they are selling vaccines to Venezuela. But the idea is that the terror that the US government is imposing all over the world is so normalized that we don't even see it. There are banks, massive corporations scared, terrified of the American government punishment, is the right word here, that they don't dare to touch the money. Capitalism, well, they like money, but they don't touch our money. You see what I mean? And again, the terrorism is called economic terrorism. There is no other way to call it. When you have a government that not only blocked us from getting vaccines, that even talking to its own allies. For example, the US government threatens Paraguay, which is a very close ally of the United States, this American government. Say American, should be the United States government. I'm sorry to say that. It's because I am contaminated by the TV here. It says, speak American, speak American. They don't even say speak English, speak American. So one tends to repeat that. But okay, the US government, to be precise, and that the idea is that they even scared or threatened Paraguay that if they dare to buy Chinese vaccines, they will be sanctioned as well. So, but they don't sell US vaccines to Paraguay because the capitalist rationale should be buy vaccines, don't buy my competitor's vaccine. But they are saying, no, don't buy my competitor's vaccine, but I'm not going to sell you mine. So die is the order. You die. And so we will die for the American dream. So that's stupid. But nobody speaks about that. So my point is they are mistreating and punishing even their own allies. They are not even punishing their enemies or rivals. They are punishing their own allies. And this stupidity is going on every single day, and nobody calls it out. So my point is, what can we do together to call out these massive aberrations, is the only word I can find right now, not only regarding vaccines or health equipment or food or essential parts for infrastructure. For example, we have blackouts. This interesting thing. Blackouts, which is true, an old with rundown infrastructure, which Felix was informing me this morning, was telling me that we had an infrastructure, electrical power grid installed capacity for 60 million people. I mean, even the double of our population, but the lack of maintenance the actual truth is that due to lack of maintenance, and because we can't buy spare parts because of the blockade, that there are so many blackouts. But the interesting thing is this. It's true. It's a rundown system. But on the 7th of March 2019, we have the worst blackout ever in our history, almost 12 days non-stop. But Marco Rubio has so visionary powers, so magical powers, that on the morning of that day, he said the Venezuelan people is going to suffer like any people in this continent has ever suffered before. He knew that the blackout was coming. I mean, that was a black operation, if you can call it that, cover operation. We were under a terrorist attack. And they say, because that's the propaganda, the way the propaganda works, the Venezuelan power system is such a rundown system that even it's their own fault, it's their corruption. But we were under a cyber attack that particular day that we couldn't restore power for 12 days because they were planning a coup d'etat on the 11th of March. I got the documents for that if you want to see it later. But my point is, we have been not only under a blockade, we also have been under a clandestine war with mercenaries from Colombia. We captured them last year. They say they are innocent, but we captured them with weapons, with plans, and they even confessed. We have been suffering. A couple of days ago, one of the most important banks in Venezuela, their brain, the computing system, went crazy. I mean, if you had $10 there, the bank told you that you had 10 million. And it was an attack. But if they say, no, the Venezuelan government is such a clumsy government, that corruption again. But the idea is we are suffering this kind of, there are so many names for this, hybrid war, unconventional war, clandestine war, fourth generation war. That's the point. And if you are really anti-war, we should stop that. Because we don't want war. Not even with Venezuela, nor with the United States. But sanctions, what I want to put it clear here, is a way of waging war. As much as mercenaries, as much as clandestine operations, as much as financial blockades. I mean, they are trying to destroy it. It's interesting, I was reading on the way, 4 days, Carlos was the one who told me, to give me the piece of news. The Chamber of Commerce of the United States of America wrote to the federal government complaining about sanctions. And they said, look, you deceived us because you told us that with sanctions, the Venezuelan government wouldn't last more than 2-3 weeks. And now they have been more than 4 years, and that government is still there. Sanction is not working. We want to topple Maduro, but that's the wrong way. Let us work to topple Maduro, but without sanctions. It's incredible, this logic. But the idea is, they thought that we wouldn't last 2 weeks. And we are winning after 4 years. That's not a small victory. That's not a small victory. We have gone through a lot of suffering, pain. I mean, it was Kissinger who said that they would make the Chilean economy cry in 1973. Well, they are doing exactly the same to us. But we are overcoming those attacks with different kinds of strategies. And now we are moderately growing again. I mean, the economic situation in Venezuela today compared with the one 2 or 3 years ago is much better. And we have the expectation of growing even more next year. But of course, the pandemic is affecting us. And we have the means to buy the vaccines and to apply all the social policies that we need, for example, biosecurity, social distancing, all the rest, to reduce the effect of the pandemic. But we are confronting the pandemic and the bigger pandemic, which is the United States government. How can, my point is always, every time I come here, I always comment, what can we do together? What can we do together to help each other, to help us win this struggle peacefully is the right, that's the best victory ever. If you win peacefully, you win twice. And also, thank you, but also to help the people within the United States understand that, first of all, we are not your enemy, but second, that if we cooperate, both sides are going to win even more. I mean, we need to cooperate. No, I'm not talking just about oil, I'm talking about social policies, ideas. I mean, we can also contribute with the way we live to your policies locally, in a local level, for example, here in New York, the city, the community, but also in a macro level, we can cooperate with on particular policies. For example, let's work together against the pandemic. Why can't we work together multilaterally? I'm not just speaking Venezuela and talking about Venezuela and the United States. The tens of countries, the whole region. But apparently, here in Washington, they think that divided, they are better. They in Washington, not we. They are better. So by dividing, they reign, yes, but by dividing, everybody's losing. And I think that you are losing here as well in the United States. The figures that you said, I mean, they are ridiculous. I mean, it's incredible, the pain that this country is going through right now. Well, I live here, I'm seeing it. And there are better ways to come out of this pandemic than just letting the poor suffer. And there are better ways of come out of a crisis than just going to war, like has been the traditional way here. I mean, if you count, I think that today is one of the few days in the United States where you are not in a state of war. It's incredible. Check it. Check check the United States history. Today is one of the few days in the history of the United States where you are not, when you are not at war, which is a happy day then. But at least a formal war, declared war against an enemy. That's why it's dangerous. They are looking for an enemy. You see? We are not the enemy. We are not. Look other way. We are not the enemy. But they really want to force us to behave like the enemy. And we don't want to play that game. But there are so many things I want to say, but I'd rather listen to you, and you can guide us through what you really want to know about Venezuela, and we can, answer back for as long as you want. Thank you very much.
Well, we've actually, Samuel, we've been waiting for almost a year to receive you again because you gave a heroic speech at the UN that we put into this book.
Thank you.
This is for you. We published this book in part inspired by Samuel telling us a few years back, we have to put these stories out there. We have to talk to the people of the United States. So you honor us with your presence tonight. That speech that you gave at the UN actually is a historic, it's a master class for anyone who wants to study unilateral coercive measures. So thank you, Samuel.
Thank you. Thank you.
We now want to actually open up the floor, and we have a few names that we want to start with. Some of you, I will surprise you, some of you might already know. We want to actually start with Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink. Question or comment? Under a minute.
Yeah, well, one very destructive international institution based in the US is the Organization of American States. And it seemed very promising, the meeting that happened in Mexico, where López Obrador was suggesting that CELAC, the Community of Latin American Caribbean States, should replace the OAS, which means an organization that wouldn't have Canada and the US as part of it. And I was talking to Carlos, and he said, well, I don't think that's really going to happen. But I wonder if just the proposal and the energy behind that meeting would help to either reform the OAS or make it less powerful, or how do you see that evolution perhaps playing out?
The Venezuelan position is that the OAS is already finished, kaput, dead. So that's why we are out of it. But I believe more countries in the region are realizing that that's the way forward. And the way forward is to be together within CELAC. And President Lopez Obrador said that, it's public. But within the gathering, the final gathering that we had in Mexico after 4 years not meeting, is something that gives us the hope that finally we're going to make it happen, and it will be through and within the CELAC, the Latin America and the Caribbean will work together for integration, solidarity, and cooperation. Because the OAS under the secretary that is now there, but actually, for us, it's not just him. He's the worst of the worst, but it's happening before. I mean, it comes from long ago, since what happened with Cuba many, many years ago. So we just decided at that moment, but we were working on that idea since long ago, since the beginning of the revolution, because the institution is not helping Latin America and the Caribbean, is not doing right, is invasive, is trying to interfere in internal affairs and not solving problems. That's why we created UNASUR, actually to have South American countries gathering together to solve political differences, not intervening. So in a way, by creating UNASUR was telling us, you're not doing your job, you're working wrong, you're gone, you're off, it's finished with you. And on top of that, we created CELAC, which is the real expression of the totality of the countries working together on our own interests. So I have great hope for the future of CELAC. And I want to thank President Lopez Obrador for really pushing it forward and being so committed to organize this gathering in which right-wing governments and socialists like President Maduro, Nicaragua, Cuba, Bolivia were present, and Peru. I want to have the chance to congratulate President Castillo, who is now with us working, and he should be capable to provide for his people and help his people in Peru, and we're ready to help him and go with him and support him. So we're more and more that are convinced. Maybe the decision taking, it takes a while, is difficult because it has to go to your bureaucracy, the parliament and whatever, because you sign a convention and then you're part of it. I don't know, in the different countries. But the voice, the general voice is that we're not happy about OAS. We're not happy with their job. And we fully, completely, 100% reject this guy who is there. I don't want to even mention his name. He's out. No one likes him. We don't like him at all. He's not working for Latin America. He's done it very wrong. He has to go. OAS safe if he goes? I don't know. We don't care. We don't want to go back to that. It's finito. It's not good. We want to have CELAC and UNASUR to come back and work together for the interests of our people in our countries. That's it. That's the way I see it. I don't know if you want to add.
We need an international multilateral organization in our continent where we can talk to each other with respect and without the superpower imposing its interests. OAS is not that one. CELAC is too young to be effective as we would like it to be, but OAS is not. And just imagine this. Where in the world you can see the Secretary General of an international multilateral organization going to the US Congress to a hearing in the Senate, pleading to the senators there, please, I'm going to inform you, report to you my last year of activities in order to get some part of the budget that you need to give me. I mean, this is not an international organization. It's an Ohio organization, Indiana organization, but it's an international organization. But it's that kind of ridiculous thing that has been going on for more than 70 years, or 60, it's 48 is the year that the OAS was created. We still endure, is the right word here, this kind of humiliation. So we need to talk to each other with respect. And that's the main, when we talk to I don't miss I've been like 4 years, 3 years, without talking to any American, US official. But every opportunity I had to talk to them face to face, said, the only thing we are asking from you is respect. It's such a difficult thing for you to give us, respect. And this is the colonial mindset, you see. With Europeans, it's exactly the same. We were talking about that. We have been talking 2 or 3 days. It's incredible how difficult for these colonialists is to offer such a simple thing as respect. That reminds me of an Irish song. That is, it's an Irish song. It's an Irish anti-colonial song regarding the English, but the song said, it's a girl that falls in love with a British man, and she said, I love you, but you never tell me that you love me. And this is something like this. We are in love with you, but I never told us back, we love you so. We love you as well. So we need respect. No, I'm not asking about love, that's too much. Respect, please. That's the only thing we're asking for. It's such a difficult thing from these people in Washington to offer to the rest of the world.
Thank you. We want to...
Just one last point on this. The system of the OAS is in itself based on colonial inheritance, like someone was saying, and the practices are so reflected there. You know, one of the most difficult things for CELAC has been to replace, or will be, eventually to replace the inter-American system and all the other aspects that are tied to the OAS that have generated dependency by some of our countries because of the historic situation of exploitation that we've been through in all these years. Now, as people in the United States, it's also interesting to raise those questions and raise what, you know, because at the end of the day, what maintains the OAS is the funding that comes from the United States and is the colonial intentions of using this instrument to overpower the rest of the countries. So it's interesting. It would be interesting to question from the United States. You know, why is this still funded? Why are we funding in the United States this type of organization that is an organization intended to make countries dependent forever on the United States and not ever rise in their own?
Storm of ideas here. One of the things that I always tell as well, these people is, you are always sabotaging our efforts to be independent. You are always sabotaging our efforts to develop, to grow, to prosper. But then you are also stopping all the migrants that you are provoking where you are sabotaging our growth. What kind of sick game is this one? I mean, you are not allowing us to grow, to prosper, but you are not also allowing the migrants that you are producing by sabotaging our efforts. I mean, this is crazy. We need to stop that. It's in your own interest to allow us to prosper. Let us alone.
Thank you. And I want to pass the mic to Brian Becker, who is National Director of the Answer Coalition, an anti-war group.
Thank you, Manolo, and thank you to the Foreign Minister, to Samuel, Carlos. Very profoundly interesting discussion that we're having. History is filled with so many ironies. 75 years ago, the UN is formed in San Francisco by the United States, an American project, and now the targets of the United States have formed a committee to defend the UN Charter from the United States. A tremendous irony. There are so many ironies, so many miscalculations. In November 2001, the Taliban offered to surrender to the United States, and Donald Rumsfeld held a press conference and said, "We don't negotiate a surrender." Talk about ironies and miscalculations, and 20 years later, the Taliban is the government. And in 2019, we were all told that Venezuela would definitely fall. Medea, Code Pink, Answer Coalition, Popular Resistance, others, we formed the Embassy Protection Collective and defended the embassy against this piracy and the violation of the Vienna Convention, the theft of your property. But it seemed like an uphill battle at the time. It seemed like we were surrounded because we were literally surrounded. And here we are, years later, a few years later, and you are telling us things are getting better. And the whole idea of the United States and what the US government provides to the American people is that your destruction is inevitable. And thus, there's no possible way to resist successfully. It's a done deed. And you asked the question, what is it that we can do together to really overcome some of the problems, the big misunderstandings? You, as a foreign minister, are a state functioning within a system of states, but we are people. And so we're developing this people's movement. So I'd like you to actually respond to talk about what the big priorities would be in terms of what people like us could actually do at this critical moment when things are getting better, but the challenges and contradictions are still so exceptionally difficult.
Thank you. Sanctions, 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 sanctions. This is the first thing. They are killing us. Sanctions kill. They are killing us. I mean, they are homicidal. Stop sanctions. And it's interesting that, again, the Chamber of Commerce is also against sanctions. This Chamber of Commerce in the United States. A group of Congress representatives are also against sanctions. I mean, the interesting thing is that there is a wave of opinion moving towards against sanctions. That's if we can do something which is, it looks feasible, it's sanctions. Let's work to eliminate sanctions, we call it unilateral coercive measures, not just against Venezuela, against Nicaragua, against Cuba. I mean, what kind of threat Cuba represents to the United States? When I studied in England, one of my best friends was an American girl, and she later, I came to the US 5 years later after I finished there, and she was working for the CIA. And she told me in full confidence, I mean, talking in a restaurant, Cuba is no threat to anyone, you see? We let that game going because the Florida politicians loved it. But Cuba is not, I'm talking about 25 years ago or more. But my point is, what kind of, again, sick game are these people playing, threatening Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Haiti, and Salvador, and Honduras with sanctions if they don't behave? That's why the OAS is there. I remember one of really dignified Haitian representatives at the OAS. To me, my time during the OAS was like for other time in jail, but it's really hopeful. I mean, all the memories I go from there are really hopeful. But one Haitian ambassador, he was supportive of Venezuela. He was about to speak out, deliver a speech supporting Venezuela, and he received a phone call. He left the room and he never came back. He was fired on the spot, and because he was going to speak in favor of Venezuela. My point is, they threatened Haiti with sanctions. I remember he told me later what kind of threat was. They threatened Haiti with eliminating the TPS for 60,000 Haitians if that man spoke that morning in favor of Venezuela. I mean, can you imagine that kind of things? I mean, I think that this kind of destruction is so unnecessary. They really didn't need to do that or threaten with that kind of punishment to Haiti. Haiti wasn't an enemy. Now you see the Haitians on the border. So who provoked that, you see? So my point is, if you ask me, I can give you 10, but if you shorten it to 1, sanctions. Let's work against sanctions to benefit of millions of people in this continent.
And just to follow up on that and what to do, I think a lot of the organizations represented here have done a lot of this work to denounce the sanctions. I know the work that Answer PSL have done. I know Code Pink that have come out and denounced The UNEC has announced the sanctions. The U.S. Peace Council has announced the sanctions. The International Progressive has announced the sanctions. This week, the DSA, International Committee, announced the sanctions. That's what we need. We need the voices to come up, because it's raising awareness, and that's very important, because society is going to begin. It has to begin to put pressure on the elected leaders and realize what this actually does to us, to all the people that live under these sanctions.
One of the awful effects of sanctions as a weapon, because it's a kind of war, I said, is that you don't feel it here. You don't even realize that sanctions are acting abroad. You don't even don't have any kind of awareness. You don't feel it in any way. But we feel them, you see? So it's very difficult to convince people in this country that sanctions are criminal if they don't see the effects and even don't feel the cost. But that's why they are so insidious and dangerous, and they are really thought by a very, very genius criminal mind. They're the super villains, really, because it's incredible the way they are waging war. I said that the United States is not at war at the moment, but they are waging economic war against millions of people, but people don't realize. And we need to call that out, you see?
Next, I wanted to invite Margaret Kimberly, who is editor and journalist of the Black Agenda Report.
Thank you so much. And I'm also with Black Alliance for Peace. We've also spoken out against sanctions many times. I just have a comment, not a question. In answer to the question of why the U.S. attacks these nations, which are no threat, I think it's connected to what Claudia said about the living conditions of here in the U.S. If Venezuela is left alone, if Cuba is left alone, if Nicaragua is left alone, these countries will all thrive. And people in this country will question the system that they live under. So that, I believe, is the biggest reason that your nation is under U.S. attack. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We also wanted to invite James Early, important cultural activist and worker here in the United States.
Thank you. I think I expressed the sentiment of all to say how encouraging it is to see the statecraft of the Maduro government handling the internal conflicts peacefully, productively, fighting off the invasive attacks of the U.S., and most significantly, the statecraft of handling the external regional threat. It is notable that the CIA was in Colombia just several weeks ago. Just last week, the head of the U.S. Southern Command was in Colombia. Colombia is the home, I think, of 9 military bases. It has already been alluded to that it is the international school of developing terrorists, now rivaling that of apartheid occupation Israel. And so to see how the government has handled that is very instructive in the patience and the discipline for, I think, all of us, including how we handle situations here. I think it's also notable that this is the 20th anniversary of the World Conference Against Racism, in which the two most difficult issues that split the entire world was the issue of apartheid in Israel and the issue of reparatory justice. I'm remembering as you speak tonight that Bernardo Alvarez, the extraordinary humanitarian statecraft's ambassador, when occupying the seat at the Organization of American States, the first step that he took was to invite Danny Glover to give a speech on reparatory justice and publish that speech as a bilingual speech. I reference that because at the CELAC conference in Mexico, the issue of reparatory justice was noted, which is a significant reflection of the increasing role of the Afro-Anglo-speaking Caribbean and CARICOM. I received an email this morning as I was on the train and from Washington to say, did you see the speech that President Maduro gave yesterday? and noting this issue of reparatory justice as well. I also looked at Grandma this morning, and there is President Diaz-Canales also raising the issue. Now, why do I reference these issues? In our discussions with the late President Hugo Chavez, who said, I'm a mestizo, but mi abuela era una negra, I am also black, and came to New York City and says, you see these big lips, you see this curly hair, that is Mother Africa. So now we are seeing these perspectives resonate in policies. Why are they important in policies? Because the only government, as we have spoken to President Diaz-Canales about, we also have spoken to President Maduro, who not so incidentally, now 4 years ago, convened the only conference in the Americas on reparatory justice. Followed that up a few months later with convening an international conference of jurists. The only analog to that, and it's the most significant one, is the Mona campus in Jamaica, where the reparations issue is not a philosophical, it's a practical, applied issue of the uplift, not just for the historical issues, but for the contemporary issues of how imperialism works. So I raise with you now that the US State Department is the only country, until now we have in CELAC, we have from the Cubans, and we have from the Venezuelans, that has a budget, that has a project, that has experts. We've seen it manifested in the San Isidro event in Cuba. They are serious about using this issue of the continuing expressions of racism and racial discrimination in the interest of undermining and regime change. And so I'd like to get your thoughts of what will be, in your view, the practical applications of what has just been raised coming out of the Mexico conference and what President Maduro announced yesterday, because this is being used as a weapon for regime change. Cuba is the prime example where they are doing that. Other countries will be brought, Venezuela and others will be attacked on that. So I hope you can comment on that. And some of us are going to have to run soon to catch a train back to Washington so that it does not get fully out of control.
As you said, we're very committed. And we raise that issue, and as part of the document that we agree on in Mexico. The discussions to agree on that paragraph were not easy. But Venezuela's position was very strong on that, even going larger on whatever we wanted to have included there. It doesn't mean that the countries are being confused and used and abused to not really side with that. The Caribbeans were very strong on their position, and we side with them. On those issues, we're always closer to our brothers in the Caribbean as a Caribbean state, and not, sadly, with some countries in the continent. That happens. It's sad. I believe we're, as you said before, we organized a gathering in Venezuela. We're going to be working tough on that. We're going to be strong on that. We're going to be always be committed as a government with that position. And we know they might be trying to use that against us and against Cuba, as you just mentioned. But we're relaxed back home, because there's no way they can use that against our people, and our people is convinced they won't never alienate the way we see it back home, not at the government level, at the total national level, at the people's level. So maybe some countries, but not against us, not with us. No, neither with this government, nor with any government in Venezuela. It will never apply, because it's part of the way we are. It's not something that will apply to Venezuela or to Venezuelan or to the Venezuelan people, and of course never to the government of Nicolás Maduro. Our position will be very strong and deep and go beyond what we already agreed in Mexico in the next meetings. And we always sit with the friends in CARICOM and the Caribbean, and we take from them, and with them we push as hard as we can with our lead within the region. So you can be convinced of that. And we can, I think we work hard on that, and we won't let the other side be of a threat for us. absolutely 100% convinced. And I'm not being naive on that. It's the people. It's not just the government. The government's position officially is very strong, but our people is very much convinced. And there's 14 states in the Caribbean that will go for that, even more than that 14. And they were never allowed. They're a huge, strong bloc of countries working in the way we work as governments when we're discussing a document with many, many, many different paragraphs. But regarding that one, the position of the Caribbean is a not negotiated position, and we side with them, and not just us, some other countries in the continent as well. Want to say something?
Let me just add something about that. We were, almost 3 weeks ago, we were discussing at the UN the Durban document regarding racism. And one of the massive rows there that night during the negotiations to approve some particular documents were the African, Caribbeans, and Venezuelans, and we made a block there. Even, I must say, Costa Rica, which is a no good friend of Venezuela, but on this particular point, they are working very hard, they are very positive, against the United States. And I thought that Trump had gone. I mean, he's gone. No, Trump is still working there. I mean, it's not called Trump, it has a new name, but it's Trump working there. So how come the American government, the US government, again, can sustain that position within the UN today? That's something for you to work it out.
Well, let me just quickly add that I would urge all of the countries in Latin America, particularly in CELAC, to intersect with what is going on in the US Congress, where this is now a mainstream discourse of reparatory justice. And this is a way of not only bringing the Black Caucus, but others who stand for the advance of humanity against racism, to cooperate with you in this scourge, which is a fundamental part of the history of capitalism. We don't need to go into a real theoretical analytical thesis there. But we, including in Cuba, with President Diaz-Canales having established a presidential commission, which he established, which he convenes on his terms, using the terms against racism and discrimination, as expressed in Cuban socialism. It is a very positive step. And this is a way, I think, of bringing not only large numbers of African Americans, but others, as we saw with Black Lives Matter, where this raised an entire global, not just discourse, but movement. And so this is one of the intersections of cooperation that I would urge be considered by saying, this is what we're doing. We have a more advanced perspective in the Caribbean and Latin America of confronting the scourge than you do in the United States, which claims to be the beacon of freedom and equality. So I would ask from a practical political point of view of what we can do together, because this is a transversal issue, not just a vertical issue, of all of the indices of health, diabetes, so forth and so on, will be manifested along those color lines, as well as working class lines. So that's why I raised the issue, and I would ask the practical implications of that be considered.
Thank you, James. And with that, we know our friends have had a long day, and tomorrow we'll have another long day. So we want to end today with giving you a small token of our appreciation. We know that even if the US limits you to 25 miles, even if not everyone receives you as a friend in this country, know that you are in a room full of friends of Venezuela. We want to give you this as a reminder of how much Venezuela, the dreams of Chavez, the leadership of Maduro inspires us to fight for what is right and what is just here in the United States as well.
Thank you. It's going to be my office.
And because, yes, we like to give gifts. We are nerds. We like to read, and we like to study. And we have a small collection here of books from Vijay Prashad, from our own publishing house. We're heavily studying China right now. So there are a few things there for you to enjoy on your plane back.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important. Beautiful.
Right.
So you're studying China?
Yes. You have to study the most important third world country on the planet right now.
China's Great Road.
Yes.
Muy bueno.
And we just published this book with speeches by Fidel. The next one we're planning with Carlos is to publish a book with speeches by Hugo Chavez.
Wow, we have to do that. We'll work with you on that. We'll help you with that.
Thank you.
We want to do it together. Gracias.
So we welcome you now, and we will keep welcoming you when you come back to New York
Thank you
next
very
year.
much. I won't miss it here. I will come earlier. The moment I arrive, I'll come here.
Thank you, friends. We hope you can still enjoy the rest of the evening, and we'll be chatting with us here. VJ, where's VJ?
Well, I want to swap.